Welcome to Friday Friends, RI Elder Info's weekly look at the organizations and individuals providing resources for Rhode Island seniors, caregivers, and professionals.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. It is 9 o'clock on Friday, and you are watching on social media, so you know that this is our weekly episode of Friday Friends, hosted by me, Deb Burton, Executive Director of RI Elder Info. We're a nonprofit here in Rhode Island that is dedicated to bringing you information and resources that you or someone you know needs to know about. And today's guest is sharing information that is extremely important. If you think about the folks that you're getting together with for barbecues this summer who are all around your age, there is a really good likelihood that 4 in 10, maybe even a little bit more, are going to need the information that we're talking about today, or they're definitely going to need to share it with somebody that they know. So please hit the like button, hit the share button, share this out everywhere and anywhere that you can think about, because this is something that is so important. As you know, we're dedicating all of our Friday Friends in the month of June to elder abuse awareness because it is happening. It's happening here in Rhode Island. It is increasing in the frequency with which it's happening. And it is incumbent on all of us to do what we can to help protect people. So hit the like, hit the share, super important. Now, I have said that we are a 501c3 nonprofit, and I am truly grateful to Point 32 Health for their support in the work that we're doing and getting people the information and resources they need, as well as Aetna and United Health and Oak Street Healthcare and Neighborhood Health. And the magic that's happening right now is from 321 Media, and England Studio maintains our website. And truly, many hands make the load light, so we could not do this without their support. So big shout out, big thank you to them. I really appreciate their efforts. So today I would like to welcome the Director of the Office of Healthy Aging, Director Maria Cimini. Hi, Maria.
Good morning, Deb. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much. As the head of Office of Healthy Aging, the Adult Protective Services falls under your jurisdiction. Can you explain what is Adult Protective Services' role in the Office of Healthy Aging? What's the do?
Yeah, I certainly can. And just again, thank you for having me. I was thrilled to join you last month for Older Americans Month and for this month for Elder Abuse Awareness, because it's so critically important. The Rhode Island Office of Healthy Aging, which used to be known as Elderly Affairs, is charged with being the advocates for older adults in Rhode Island, making sure that people have access to the programs that they need, making sure that as a state we're pursuing policies that support aging in place, aging as people choose to live as they grow older. But one of the most important critical responsibilities that we have is that by law, we oversee adult protective services. And so that means that just like I think people are familiar with reporting child abuse or have heard of that if you see a child being abused, there's a CPS, a Children's Protective Services unit in Rhode Island that's called the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. The same is true for older adults. Older adults can also be vulnerable and be victims of abuse. And in those cases, everyone in the state of Rhode Island, and I'm going to repeat that, every person in the state of Rhode Island is a mandated reporter. If you suspect that someone aged 60 or older in the state is being abused by a loved one or a caregiver, you have an obligation to report that to us at the Office of Healthy Aging. I see that along the lower footer of the screen. Our phone number is there. I so appreciate that. 462-05555 is the number to call if you have concerns about someone. And I also want to repeat that piece. It's about having concerns. I know that if you see something and you're concerned about behavior or treatment of someone, it might feel like you might be anxious about making a call of abuse. Like you don't necessarily want to get anyone in trouble, but you are concerned that something might be wrong. You're not really sure what to do. I want to tell all of your viewers, all of your listeners, that you don't need to hold that anxiety. What I want you to do is to call us. Let us take that. Our staff is trained to get the information, to do investigations, and to pursue the appropriate course of action based on what they see. And oftentimes what they see, they may identify as abuse, but it doesn't mean someone's going to jail. It means that there needs to be an intervention of community resources. There needs to be an intervention of respite. We often find that caregivers, because caregiving of someone with illness can be a struggle, can be emotionally draining. People, I mean, I can say that there have been times in my life that I've snapped at people a little bit when I'm tired and hungry and someone's like just not doing what I've asked them to do, you know? And in those moments, I always would wish for someone to give me a break. And sometimes that's what the result is of an abuse call. It's nobody being taken to jail, it's being connected to services to get the break. And I think that that's really important for people to understand. It's really sometimes it's a kind of social service call more than it is a legal or police involvement call.
Right. And how do people know the difference from, so I noticed you were very specific if it is someone who is a caregiver or family member. How do you know if it's a call to the Office of Healthy Aging, or I would hope if people saw like an acute incident, they would know to call 911.
Yes.
But how do they know, if it's sort of like the suspicious contractor coming around? Is that the Office of Healthy Aging? Is that the police? How do people delineate when to call Office of Healthy Aging at the 462-0555 number?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really great question. And I think first I want to comment, if someone is seeing an active incident, we are not first responders. Call 911. If you're seeing someone actively being abused in some way, please get the appropriate authorities involved. The statute, the law that we work under, says that the Adult Protective Services Unit is involved with investigating and connecting to services abuse of adults age 60 and older who live in Rhode Island, where the abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation is being done by someone who is expected to be a caregiver for them. So that could be a family member, or it could be a home health aide. It could be somebody who's helping out like that. The suspicious contractor coming around, the person who's like knocking on the door trying to sell a lot of things, that's really not our domain. If someone could call us, and we would our staff would try to assist to connect to the right place. I actually think a suspicious seller might be the Department of Business Regulation. I'm actually not sure. But again, I want to reinforce that I don't want people sitting at home trying to decide if what they're seeing is worthy of intervention or the right intervention. We have people who call us who are saying, like, I'm actually not sure how old my neighbor is, but they seem kind of frail and I'm concerned. And so we'll investigate. We'll figure out what the right path is. So let us take that on. It's our job. It's our responsibility. I also want to take a moment, Deb, to talk about the types of abuse we investigate. So I think when people think of abuse, it's very common to think of like physical abuse. And certainly we do that. We investigate issues of physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional or psychological abuse, also neglect. So if you know that someone's child or granddaughter lives with them, but you see that that person's gone for days at a time, and in those days that older adult is always wearing the same clothes, maybe wandering around a little confused, maybe you're concerned that they're not eating, that's neglect. Make that phone call for us. Financial exploitation. If you have someone who is stealing from an older adult, if you if you suspect that a person who's responsible for the older adults for paying their bills is the electricity is being shut off, like that there's something, not right there, we can investigate that as well. And additionally, we also are the place to call for self-neglect. And so sometimes it's not that someone is being abused by an external person. They have gotten to a place where they're not taking care of themselves well. And we can look into what those issues are as well, whether it's issues of cognition, or we identify you're concerned that somebody's lost a lot of weight, you're concerned that they're wearing the same clothes all the time, you're concerned that they seem confused, you see a neighbor and you just like, maybe you've noticed that they have lots of bruises that seem unusual, or you haven't seen them for days. And like, those are issues of self-neglect. And in those cases, the way that our office works, the intake process is the same. The person who answers the phone, or you can also report online if you're more comfortable. If you're like me, who thinks of things at like 11 o'clock at night and you're just like, oh, I'll just fill out a form. You can do all of that. That intake process is the same. Our screeners will look at it, identify if it's abuse or an issue of self-neglect. And if it's self-neglect, our investigators are not the people to follow up. It's a community social service agency who follows up. So we hope that even lessens what could be a scary circumstance. Somebody just knocking on the door saying, I'm from the Office of Healthy Aging, and we have concerns about you. They say it nicer than that. I don't know why I use that tone. But rather, it's someone from a community agency, an agency that's in your neighborhood that you probably are familiar with, saying, hey, we've heard that you might need some help. What can we help with? And so we can, in those ways, connect people to resources in the community. It's not just like the Law and Order SVU vision of abuse that we have in our heads. That's not to say that there aren't times where we do engage law enforcement. We do work closely with the Attorney General's office. We do have resources for those serious circumstances. But most of the time, it's about intervention, it's about education, it's about connection to services, it's about helping people make plans about how they can be safer. And one of the things that I found most interesting, Deb, as you know, I've been in this role just about a year. I was not very familiar with adult protective services before joining, but I have spent a lot of time in my career learning about and working within the domestic violence space. And for me, there are so many parallels there. I think that most of our society understands that if someone is being abused in a domestic violence situation, it can be hard for that person to leave immediately. They may reach out and seek support, but not be ready to walk out the door. And so that is true in this case too. If our investigators go to someone's home and that person says, I'm fine, we're going to walk away unless there's something dire in front of us. We're not going to pull anybody out of a home. We're not going to force anyone to engage with services. But we will leave the door open for them to say, if you ever are concerned, you're welcome to give us a call just to find out more. And if we hear of any other concerns, we're going to come back out and check on you. Because sometimes people might even know that their situation isn't safe, but they're so afraid about what might come. You know, they might feel like it's safer to be in a house with a relative who's not treating them very well because they don't know where else they would go, or they don't want to destroy their larger family relationships. And we understand that. We don't force anyone to take our assistance, but we do try to make it clear that if someone declines our assistance the first time, we haven't closed the door on them. They are welcome to come call us again. We will come out again. We will check in again, because our priority is keeping older Rhode Islanders safe.
You know, one of the first things that you did when you took your position was to update the website so that it is far more user-friendly now to report situations. And I'll make sure that there's a link in the comments so people can just even hit the link. They don't have to worry. It's crawling across the bottom of the screen in the Chiron, but they don't have to worry like, oh my gosh, I can't type that fast. When someone is, maybe it's, you know, one of the examples I'll give is maybe you live in one of our high rises, and first of the month, your neighbor is like so excited because her son's coming to visit and they're going to go out to lunch and she's so happy. And well, you know, he's got that back cell phone bill, so he just needed some money. And now your friend gives him money. And then later in the month, your friend is asking if you can take her to the food bank.
Mm-hmm.
But she was so excited to see her son.
Right.
And then the next month, well, he owes some back child support. So she had to give him some money. Is the Office of Healthy Aging Adult Protective Services, if that neighbor is seeing these things and she sniffs out a rat and thinks something's not quite right,
Mm-hmm.
does Adult Protective Services, and that neighbor does the right thing. They call the 401-462-055 number. Does Adult Protective Services go into that neighbor and say, stop giving your son money? Or do you have a bigger conversation?
Oh, it's absolutely a bigger conversation. And I would say first, in that circumstance, I would be thrilled if that neighbor called, because like someone might not hear that story and think abuse, but they would hear that story and think, "Oh, there's something not right." And that's really what I want people to think about. Like something just feels off. Give us a call. We'll investigate that. And so yes, our investigators would go out. They would sit down with the person, with the son, and say, so like let's talk about your relationship with your son. I'm so glad that he comes to see you, that you love him so much. Let's talk about what those visits look like. And we understand that maybe you give him money every visit. What does that do to the rest of your month's finances? And so it's more about having those conversations to help people see what might be happening, and then following that person's lead, right? If that person says, I know that it doesn't help me, but it's my son and I love him and I have a responsibility to take care of him no matter how old he is and how old I am, well then, we're not going to take over somebody's bank account. We have no authority to do that. We'll say, well, we appreciate the care for your son, but let's think about how to put up some safeguards for you. Would you like us to talk about that? And so it really is more of a conversation. We really, in all circumstances, seek to be very person-centered, let someone guide us where they want to be. It's the overall mission of the Office of Healthy Aging. We want people to age as they want to age. Now, we don't always have the resources in our state or the magic wand to make that possible for every person in every circumstance, but we're going to do the best that we can to get them as close to that as possible. If I could, I wanted to just comment on two other things that you said. One is I'm so pleased that you find the new website helpful. It was one of my first priorities after joining the office, but I think what was exceptionally important to the process is that we talked to several people from the community who used our website on a regular basis. So we shared it with resident service coordinators at senior high rises. We shared it with financial institutions who report to us when they're seeing suspicious interactions in checking accounts. We shared it with senior centers, and to understand what they need it to be, because we know what information we need to capture, but we don't know how you engage with it, right? We very much wanted to trust our partners to say, how could we ask this question in a way that would make sense to you? And then also challenge us all within the Office of Healthy Aging and our community partners to think, how does someone who's not part of this network, someone who is concerned about their neighbor or their aunt, how would they feel comfortable filling this out? How can we make it as less scary as possible? And ask the questions in a way that someone might understand. Because I think I work in government. I've worked in government for a while. We can easily get into language that makes sense to us, but not to any normal human. And so I want to thank you for your participation in that, and say that it's very important that we're using that lens through this work. And I also want to say, in the example that you just provided, I mean, I know it's hypothetical, but how lovely to have a great neighbor who will be watching and reporting such things. But I also want to take a moment and explain to folks a little bit about our confidentiality rules. Sometimes people are concerned about making such a call because they're afraid that someone's going to know. So in that circumstance, the neighbor who made the phone call might be afraid that the neighbor she's concerned about would knock on her door and say, how could you? Mm-hmm. How could you say that my son is trying to hurt me in some way? That doesn't happen. We have incredibly strict confidentiality rules that we keep to, that we never share with anyone who it was who made the report. Like our professional staff know, but we would never tell the alleged victim who it was who made the report. The flip side of that, which can be frustrating for some people, is that we also don't follow up with the reporter to tell them what we've learned, because that victim has the right to confidentiality. So if we go out, when we go out, if the victim says, I don't need any help, or the victim says, yes, I want to file a police report against my son, if the victim says, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do, we don't then call the person who made the report to say, hi, we went out there, they turned us away. Or, hi, we went out there, we're now going to call the police. Or because they have a right to confidentiality of their own life. So the confidentiality, I think, brings reporters peace of mind that they can make that phone call and not worry. But it can also give them a little bit of frustration so sometimes people will call and say, I called and I've never heard anything. I don't know what happened. The son is still coming over for lunch. And in that case, all we can do is say, if you are still concerned, report again. Because maybe that's the opportunity for us to go out a second time, and that person sat and thought about our first visit and might be more apt to accept help on the second visit. Maybe they're still going to turn us away, or maybe there are safeguards that have been put in place financially and the son is just coming over for lunch now. I can't predict, and I can't tell. In fact, I don't generally know what happened as the director of the agency. It's not my scope of information within the confidentiality rules.
You know, you had mentioned that you had worked in domestic violence, and so my statistics might be off a little bit, but victims of domestic violence, I think it takes 6 attempts to get out of an unsafe situation. And when you are an older adult, maybe you have a mobility impairment, maybe simply being able to adequately use the cell phone effectively to be able to navigate getting those resources, or being able to get out of the house to get help. I think that adds another layer of difficulty when you are being victimized, making it even more important that if somebody is seeing something that strikes them as strange, that they report it. And if it continues to happen, that they continue to report it, because your team could be knocking on that door, who knows, maybe once a month. And it might be that 6th time that they're knocking that elder says, yes. But if we do it once and done,
that's so true.
It might not be possible.
Yeah.
And we spoke with Cheryl Patnod from St. Elizabeth's Safe Haven to make sure that people know that if somebody is in an unsafe situation and they need care, they need help, that they can work with Adult Protective Services and go to a safe haven and be safe. And they're going to have their needs met. And it doesn't matter if they have a mobility impairment. Help is available.
That's right. That's right. Sometimes the path of support is through Adult Protective Services. I mean, it's not my preferred structure at always, but sometimes that's true. And, people contact us about issues of self-neglect because they're concerned about a hoarding issue. And then we learn that the hoarding is going to turn into an eviction. And so then we can work with Rhode Island Legal Services to prevent the eviction on the legal side and connect to cleanouts. And so it is so much more. And as you shared, that Safe Haven is such an incredible program that if someone is being abused and they are ready to go, they need to go, where do they go? And especially if they have a mobility issue, we do have a place for them to go, a place to be safe, to reassess, to figure out next steps. Like, nobody needs to worry that they're going to just walk out the door and then be on their sidewalk looking around saying, well, what good did this do me? I went from one bad situation to another.
Right.
We're going to get them through to that better situation.
And I wanted to just remind everybody, if you're calling the 401-462-055 number to report suspicions of abuse, it doesn't always mean that somebody needs to leave their house. So sometimes I hear like a daughter will call me and I'll say, well, I'm not the right place to report any kind of abuse, neglect, anything. If you get my voicemail, it says the same thing. You have to call the 462-0555 number. But in having a conversation with someone, they'll say, my mom is adamant. She said, until death do we part, in sickness and in health, and she will not let anybody take care of my dad. And she can't do it. And she won't listen to me. She thinks I'm just the meddling daughter or I'm the kid. When people call the 462-0555 number, you have the ability to help people navigate that health and social service system, and it doesn't mean taking them out of the house, correct?
That's right. I think one of the interesting things about adult protective services investigating adult abuse is that people think about what people are more commonly aware of as child abuse, where they do often take children out of homes because children are children. Adults have the right to make their own decisions unless they've been deemed incompetent to do so. So people do have the right to say yes or no to us in a way that in a child abuse situation, we wouldn't have those options afforded. But I think it's the kind of frame people have. But if we have time, if I could tell a quick story that was so eye-opening for me. When I started in this role, I went out with an investigator for a day and had such an incredible visit. I often say to him that day, like, it's seared in my brain. And I think about it so much in the work that we do. We went to a home to investigate abuse. We got a call that a husband was refusing to give his wife her medication. We get to the home. There were a lot of physical challenges with the home. The stairs were unsafe, like doors wouldn't open well. They needed other things as well. The investigator sat down with the wife, who was the reported victim. She explained that she didn't always take her medication. I was there. I was chatting up the husband. He said, yeah, I don't give her medication. The investigator then talked to the husband and the husband again said, yes, I don't give her medication. There were 13 bottles lined up on the windowsill. The gentleman said he gives her 3 of them because he knows what they do. That they were in their 80s, and for 70 plus years, his wife had never taken so much as an aspirin. And she had a fall. She has cognitive decline now. Suddenly, she came home from the hospital with 13 bottles. Some of them made her sleepy. Some of them made her sick. He didn't understand. She didn't understand. He gave her the 3 that he understood. And so, and I'm like, I get emotional thinking about it. Like, they were just a really cute older couple. And my investigator talked to them about, like, could I send out someone, like a pharmacist, to come out to explain the medications? And this gentleman happened to be a veteran. He said, I think we could get somebody to fix your stairs. Can we do that too? So he did all that, and we walked out to the car, and my investigator said, so that was substantiated abuse. And my first thought, again, because I've watched too much Law and Order in my life, was, are we sending the police to this house? Are we arresting this man? And he said, absolutely not. Of course not. It meets the definition of abuse. He is her caretaker. He was not providing the care that was expected. But there's no need for law enforcement here. We need to get people into the house to help them understand what is happening. And it's a story that I tell a lot. Perhaps I've told it on this show before, but to me, it was such a great experience for me to have, because in my mind, it was police rushing in. It was people being pulled out of their homes. And there certainly are moments of really extreme abuse where we bring in law enforcement. I don't want to say that doesn't exist, and we pursue with local police and the Attorney General's office if appropriate. But it's much more often like people are trying to do the best that they can. And because they're not aware of resources, because they have failing health, because a social system has changed and they don't know what to do, they don't know what to do. And so in that case, I don't know who made that phone call, but without a doubt, they made the lives of this couple healthier and happier because they were able to get connected to resources and for what was abuse. But we're addressing it with social interventions, with care and support. And to me, it was really eye-opening about why adult protective services is as much about connecting to health and community as it is about protecting someone who's in danger.
It's both.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really good example of people really doing the best that they can,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes what they're doing is abusive, and it's not with a malicious intent. Make no
Right.
doubt, there are some jerks out there who are doing it maliciously
Right.
and would like to see them under the prison. But
Sure.
that's a whole other thing.
A different story for a different day.
Exactly. But you
Right.
know, a lot of times with caregiving, it's hard. And that's why there are people who do it for a living. And you know, I did want to just make one thing really clear. Even though a lot of what we're saying is about couples who are opposite sex, there are some additional challenges when the couples are same sex
True.
because of a lot of the societal beliefs and structures around that. There are people who are in our LGBTQ community who have a whole other layer of fear of reporting and fear of having people come into their house and law enforcement. And I want to respect and honor that space.
I so appreciate you saying that, Deb.
Like,
as you know, last fall we held an Adult Protective Services conference, and one of the most powerful panels that I witnessed was one from with individuals representing the Southeast Asian community, the Hispanic community, the LGBTQ community, the deaf and hard of hearing community, like thinking about how do we meet people's understand where they come from culturally, what their specific fears might be about how the support that they will receive, and whether or not it will be appropriate for their lives. I'm so pleased you mentioned it. It is something that we try to ensure through regular trainings with our staff and with the community that we're aware of that to keep people safe and happy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which brings me to another real quick question. When people call the 401-462-055 number, or if they go online and they speak another language, can people get help from Adult Protective Services in another language? Is that available?
We have, yes, not all languages easily, but so among our staff, we have people who speak English, Portuguese, and Spanish. And so we can respond among our own team. And then we have resources to connect to language lines for other translation services.
So if you are the English speaking neighbor and you know that person
yes,
maybe speaks, I don't know, Polish.
Sure. Yep.
You can get the language, they can get the language line and have that taken care of. And
it's a question that we ask of the person making the report. We ask a lot of questions of the person making the report, understanding not everybody will know every answer. But we do ask about language. We do ask about whether or not there are other people who live in the home. We do ask about things like dogs or firearms in the home. And that's as much for our safety as it is for the folks that we're going out to just know what we might expect to see, and so that we can keep an environment safe. But yes, if we know that someone has speaks another language or has, excuse me, a mobility issue, maybe a hearing impairment, a visual impairment, we will ask those questions so that we can be as prepared as possible. Because just imagine if someone shows up at your door and you're not expecting them, and they have a state badge, which looks very official, and then you can't understand what it is they're asking of you. And if you are a person who's suffering from abuse, or you have a self-neglect cognitive issue, that's definitely going to raise additional anxiety. So we want to be as prepared as possible to meet the person that we need to speak with in the way that they are best able to be connected with.
Absolutely. And we have people from all over the world that come to this country. And in some countries, if somebody shows up with an official badge, they disappear.
Yes.
And that, that can be really frightening. We definitely have elders and not always elders, who have had that experience.
Right.
So I think it's really important that when somebody is reporting to 462-0555 or going online, that they're including as much information
Mhm.
as they possibly can for everybody's safety, to make it maybe even one less question that has to be
That's right.
asked.
That's right.
So Maria, is elder abuse something that you're seeing has increased even in the time that you've been here?
Yeah. So, it's data is always interesting. We have seen an incredible increase in reports. Do I know that it's an increase in abuse or if it's an increase in awareness of the need to report? I don't know. But what I can tell you is in the last 2 years, we've seen a 40% increase in reports to our Adult Protective Services unit. It's an astonishing number. In 2022, we received just over 6,100 contacts from the state of Rhode Island. And I anticipate that they will increase only because our aging population is increasing, like our older adult population is increasing. So there's like a subset of a population. I don't have a specific statistic in my head, but we would expect that a certain subset might be in this circumstance. What I do want to say about that though, and Deb, you're so helpful in this, is that I am looking to do some much more promotion about services that are available to people. We fund the Aging and Disability Resource Center called The Point in Rhode Island here through the Office of Healthy Aging. They are full of resources, community action programs, senior centers, RI Elder Info. And the reason why I really want to push that is because our self-neglect increases, the self-neglect calls have been the highest rate of increase. And in my mind, self-neglect, and I'm looking at self-neglect through like a public health prevention strategy standpoint. If we're doing a better job promoting the services that are available, if we're doing a good job making folks aware that they can get food from Meals on Wheels or from a food pantry or from a congregate meal site or from a commodity supplemental food program or from SNAP benefits or from the senior farmer market program. Like there are several programs. If you know that there are respite programs, and so if you are a caretaker and you are tired, that there are programs where we can send professionals in to give you a break. We have an incredible program with every nursing school in the state where nursing students get credit for providing respite. If you knew that you could go away for a weekend and make sure that your older adult was safe, if you knew how to get connected to adult day services or home care services, like in my mind, if people were aware of and able to fully access the array of services available, our self-neglect calls would go down because people would have those services. Our self-neglect calls, we code everything. Like our highest percentage of self-neglect calls by far are related to cognition. If we were able to connect people to the programs for Alzheimer's and other related dementias, if we were able to connect people to the adult day programs and the home care programs for people with dementia, we would see a reduction in people making phone calls about concerns of neighbors that they're seeing without any supports. Similarly, with our mental health or with food calls, if people were connecting to those services, I believe that our self-neglect calls would go down. And then the self-neglect calls that we would get would highlight for us the areas of need we still have in our state, because we know we don't have resources available and both that exist and are available and affordable and quality for every person who needs them at every time that they need them. So if we can do more work in the prevention space to prevent self-neglect before it happens, then the calls that we get would help us to identify where we need to funnel our energies for building new programs and making new connections.
And I think that's really important. I don't think government can solve all things. It would be great if it could, but that's a huge tax lift.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people get really frustrated with the machinations of government.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really going to come back to each one of us giving back to our community
Mm-hmm.
and helping support someone else, because you guys have volunteer programs. We have different organizations around the state. And it's interesting to me if you post in any community page on Facebook, hey, I have an elderly neighbor who needs their yard cleared. You get 50 people showing up to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's more good in the world than bad.
Oh, without question. Yes.
It just doesn't get the hype.
Right.
So I think it's important that people do call and report when they have concerns. But also, if they know that their neighbor is 90 and we just got snow, well, it kind of be remarkable because we're in June, but go shovel them.
Right.
Don't say, I know they got a son that visits once in a while. If you can't, go shovel them. Because now it actually gave a break to that son so that when that older person needs a run to the pharmacy, the son can worry about running to the pharmacy.
That's right.
Instead of,
yeah.
We're talking about sons and daughters and spouses, but there are also people out there who have no one.
Right.
And I mean, emergency contact, no one.
I know.
And we can do something about that.
I'm
hopeful.
Yes, I am too. I think we have great partners in the community, and I hope that you'll, as community partners, utilize me as a partner in government, because neither can do it all for all people. And so we need to rely on each other. And just as our neighbors need to rely on each other, our community agencies and our government agencies need to rely on each other to ensure that all Rhode Islanders have what they need.
Amen. I think that's a great place to stop for today. Any final words?
I just want to thank you for having me. The issues of elder abuse, we don't talk about them enough, and it's so critical. We never want to think about an older adult who is alone or being victimized and just don't know where to go. And I think aging can be isolating. We found that even more so with COVID. And in this kind of conversation helps us to address the isolation and the challenges of isolation, the health outcomes of isolation, and the health outcomes of being in an abusive situation, whether that's malicious by those bad apples in the world or people who are doing the best they can and just not having it in them or not knowing how to connect. So please, if you have concerns about an older adult in your life, don't try to figure it out yourself about whether or not it's abuse or who you need to make the call. Just call us. We'll take it from you. You don't need to hold that weight. You can just go over for a cup of tea sometime, and we can handle the connection to whatever resource that is, whether it's a social service agency or a police department. That's our job. And so we're happy to do it for you.
And what was that phone number again?
It was 4620555. Having 3 5s is tricky in a number. I trip over it.
Maria, I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing this information. It's so important that people have it. And I'd be happy to have you come back on and talk about other programs.
Anytime.
Absolutely. We got to get people connected to what's out there.
That's right. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody, this is a situation that is growing more and more every day. And I know we went long today, but I'm confident that you stuck with us because this is something that is truly impacting a lot of people. And there's help and resources available. So please, if you have concerns, it's not your job to prove. If you have concerns about an older adult, please call 401-462-0555 and let people know so that they can get the help that they need and want. It's really important. We're all in this together, so we got to row the boat in the same direction. I look forward to seeing you all again next week. In the meantime, be well and be kind.
If you like this video, please follow us on social media and subscribe on YouTube. For more information, visit rielderinfo.com or call 401-585-0509. If you have any questions, email deb@rielderinfo.com.